Hello, good afternoon, and welcome everyone to this week's workshop. This is going to be our fifth in our Piggy Banks to College Funds Lunch and Learn Part 5 Women Financial Wellness. And this is being presented by Mass Mutual. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you. And yes, this is our statewide family engagement hub team. And we are grateful that you are with us. If you are watching this live or if you're watching this as a recording, we have a wealth of offerings that we are doing for you. So a little bit about our family engagement project. We are all about providing families, communities, educators, and students support and information around family engagement because we know that when families and communities are engaged, they are going to result in higher student success. So we have all these workshops, webinars, and activities to support that work. And for today, we are going to have a very special guest, Christina Zappi, doing our final in the series on financial wellness, on women's wellness. So without further ado, Christina, thank you so much for joining us and welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's been a fun couple weeks here. As Kim mentioned, I am fancy names financial advisor over at Mass Mutual, and this is one of my favorite workshops here. I specialize I run our women's team out of this office and work with various women groups, spreading the word around financial literacy topics. I always love this workshop. So before we hop into it, I know if you've been on these series, you've seen this, but nonetheless, all this is saying is this presentation does not go over specific tax or legal advice. We're not authorized to do so, and if you do so, we suggest seeking out specific professionals. Again, this is more general financial literacy education. If you've been on the series, you've seen this slide, and I just want to drive it home one last time. Why Mass Mutual, why we go out and work with groups like NJFE, different employers, whatever it may be, and do these workshops is to help as many individuals as we can become financial or increase their financial wellness. And what that means to us, or what is financial well-being, is a couple things. And they seem rudimentary, but many of you, I'm sure, are looking to tackle some of these, and you would be shocked how many people have similar concerns and questions around these very first starting points. So, first, what is financial well-being? One, having control over your day-to-day and month-to-month finances. I can't tell you how many times if we ask someone what's coming in and out per day or per month, it's really difficult to answer that question, even myself, if I don't go through certain exercises. So you, first and foremost, is what I like to call having inventory on your finances. Two, and you've probably been reading the news and whatever way it's going, I think it just brings up a point of financial wellness is being able or being capable to absorb financial shock. What that means is we're seeing a lot of volatility in the markets related to finances. How are we able to create a plan where no matter what's going on with a certain asset or market, we're able to absorb that shock and continue forward with our plan? Three, being able to track and meet our financial goals. I know there's a recording, I think, on the second in the series that I did on SMART goals, and it really walks through how to be able to set financial goals. The main takeaways there, your goals need to be measurable and need to have a timeline. Therefore, you can track your progress against them. Lastly, this is a fun term that you'll hear thrown around a lot, having the financial freedom to make choices that allow one to enjoy life. I think this means a lot of different things to everyone. To me, this doesn't mean that you're working or not. It just means based off of your financial landscape or what you have going on from a financial standpoint, you're able to go about your life as you'd like, whether it be working or not, whether it be, going on that vacation, having that house. It can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. It's just having the ability to do so. So, as Kim mentioned in the beginning, you'll see this is a high level financial literacy workshop, but it'll point to some perspectives, or I'll call them like or generalized behaviors per se, that we see when we work with various women groups. So, I'll dive into that in a little bit here, but first, we're going to start high level. First, I think a lot of times when we're talking about wealth, what that means, some people have different ideas. To us, we really look at it from a numerical perspective. It's defined as the total value of all the assets you own minus the debts. So that would mean all the assets you have minus anything you owe, like a mortgage or student debt or credit card loans, etc. That's where we look at it from, like, we put our fiduciary hats on and we're working with people through their financial plans. That's what we look at. But I think a lot of times what's important is wealth has a numerical tie to it, but why we're all looking to achieve it is usually for the feeling of what I like to call comfort that it provides. It's not necessarily the same number for all or the same feeling for all. Some people are tied to wealth more emotionally than others. Some people have a more defined numerical value than others. But nonetheless, I find a lot of people, especially women in the space, they kind of chop up finances to a topic that maybe isn't as common when you're talking with your friends or colleagues that or peers that are women or whatever it may be. We're making huge strides, I'd say, in the corporate and overall professional world when it comes to income, which is great. And I don't want to call it a gap, but we've seen kind of the next step to that progression is how do we, make more women professionals comfortable with now taking that new income and opportunities that we find that we have access to and turning it into this quote unquote term wealth. So that's really the overall goal here. You'll see in our agenda, first, we're going to touch base. I think it's important on women's perspective. Again, it's generalized. It doesn't mean we all completely align to what I'll go through, but I think it's a trend that I've seen prevalent enough that it's important to at least bring up. And then we're going to go through kind of what we call our pillars of financial literacy. So first is savings, then investing, then that fun term retirement, and then how do we go through, today and really start taking control following this presentation. So as I mentioned, this is a general or idea, but I think it's really important because time and time again I see it be true. So how do we view money? First, nearly women are less likely to save a set amount each month. So 47% of women save only what is left over after expenses. What does that mean? So more than half of women, and we find it more prevalent in women, is we tend to lean more conservative. So you'll see from an overspending perspective, usually women are able to just naturally or intuitively spend, I don't want to say within their means, but be more aware of how much they can spend. However, we're less likely to treat savings as an expense, and more so we treat it as an afterthought. So this goes back to one of my workshops in the last series where when we work with a client or when we work with someone that has questions and I sit down with someone, the first thing I do with them is go through their monthly cash flow. What do they have coming in and what do they have coming out? And from there, when we look at savings or any savings and investing goal this person may have, we then want to add savings or whatever investing amount we figured out that they should do per month as an automated expense, which I've talked to before, where when we get paid, we are pulling out that amount and deploying it into a growth account or investments, whatever it may be. So the money left over is what we should spend. It's not an afterthought where I get paid, I spend what I do within the 2 weeks, and then whatever's left over is what I'm calling my quote unquote spending. There's not much thought into that. And kind of back to my last point, if we have goals, there's no measurable aspect to that. We're kind of just going day by day. by the seat of our pants, just really seeing what's there left over. So yeah, it's great if we're saving something, but to really start making serious progress in your, call it, financial future, it's important to have a set amount and an automated amount that you save when you get paid. That way, whatever's there left over is for spending, and it's not like your savings is taking a back seat. Two, over half of women are less willing to take on investment risks. So we see women are a lot more concerned about taking on too much investment risk. I can't tell you how many times when I do women ERG groups or presentations like this, if they decide that they want to meet with me afterwards, the number one situation I see is 80% or more of these women's savings are just sitting in savings. A lot of the times it's not that the women that I meet with don't have cash, it's that they're not deploying it into any vehicle. I think where we can see emotions and why this occurs is if you've been paying attention in just this year alone, so 2026, the markets are down a little over 6%. We don't need to get into market exacts, but I see it time and time again. My women clients are usually a little more in tune with what's going on in the markets and definitely looking to have larger emergency funds than others than I work with. And overall, I just see this trend of, we're doing somewhat of savings. It's usually not structured, but we're not taking advantage of investment vehicles, which we might not feel the pain now, but when we look to retiring or achieving goals, we're really doing it through brute force because we're not using statistically market-based vehicles. But yes, it's going to have volatility in it, but having part of our savings in that can be really powerful to keep up or even outpace inflation over long periods of time. Lastly, women are uncertain when it comes to retirement finances. Little under half of women are unsure how long their income will last in retirement. I'd say this is a general gap that we see, but especially within the group itself, where people have not taken the time to look at one, what do they need in retirement? And two, how much do they have to save and invest to be able to generate that? And I think we're seeing this now with the new generation retiring, and there's not as many pensions as there used to be. A lot of people are having to go back to work. A lot of people are having to live on a lot less income than they thought that they would need because they never took the time to really sit down, analyze their situation, whether they're 30, 40, 50, or 65. How much income do I need based off of my lifestyle per year to be able to retire? And then what do I need to do now to be able to generate that? It's an overwhelming question, and I'm not saying it has to be me. I'm agnostic to any professional you use. I strongly, strongly suggest whether you do it online or you meet with a professional, that is one thing not to wait on. It's a bigger goal that you're going to need to achieve, but a lot of people are just trying to achieve it without even knowing where to go. So it's really important to understand the overall trends we're seeing in the group when it comes to finances. And as we go, the overall goal is to give high level ideas and options to people to start taking action, along with resources that they're comfortable with to kind of break down these barriers that this slide is showing. So you've seen this on some of my workshops before if you've attended, and I want to go with that we need more of a set goal than 10% or you're not making progress. Yeah, it'd be great if we all set the goal of wanting to save 10% of our monthly income. I think what's important here is we want to know what percentage we are saving and what percentage we need to work up to achieve our goals. So I'd say like one of the action items take from this presentation, you should know what percentage of your gross income, which is pre-tax, that you are saving per month. That is like a fact that we should know, that if we're going to become financially literate, if we're going to become people that start to have financial plans, that after this, you can go in, you see your paycheck or your salary. You don't even have to worry about taxes. You figure out how much you're saving per month, and bam, you have that percentage. What we do with that is kind of a next conversation, but I think that's a great place to start. This savings can go to a lot of different things. I think this is why, creating a financial plan can become difficult and why we meet with so many people. And the first thing they tell us as professionals is, I don't know where to start. Because, yeah, great. I say I'm saving 10%. How do I break it up between all these things? We need an emergency fund because I've mentioned this before and people laugh. If my tire pops on the way to work or whatever it may be, I need to be able to pay that expense without my whole, month to month finances falling apart, kind of to that first slide I talked about. Two, large purchases. At some point in life, there's things that are going to come up, whether it be a house, college savings, any purchases for yourself, like a car. We need to be able to be putting small amount of savings over time to these goals so we can achieve them at some point. Three, retirement savings. I know I'm kind of harping on it, but I do want people to leave here. You should know how much you're saving. And then I think it's important, even if it's in today's dollars, figure out what you'll need. Say you're 50, if and you make $100,000, how much over inflation will that be in 15 years when you're 65? I'm making up numbers, but say it's 200,000. What do I need to save and invest to be able to create that income for myself in retirement if my salary shuts off? I strongly push people because that's how we're going to figure out how much we should put towards retirement savings. So those are two great calculations that, yes, it's going to take some brain power and it can be a little overwhelming. If you need help, I'm happy to talk through it with you, but these are things you can do on your own to start getting a picture of where it is you need to be. Lastly, college tuition. This could be for yourself or for children. How you get involved and how much you get involved with is totally a personal preference, but nonetheless, can't tell you how many times I meet with families where their children are juniors and seniors and we start talking about this. And yeah, there's efficiencies we can find, but the sooner we start, as with any of these goals on the screen, the easier they become. So nonetheless, from this slide, I want you to take away a great exercise you can do following this workshop. Figure out what percentage of your salary you are saving per month. It's a great starting point. As I said, this is a strategy that seems basic, but I'd say not even 90% of people are utilizing it. And it's really important to automate your savings. You want to make savings an expense. I can't tell you how many people I meet, they have no idea how much they're saving. Or they might think they're not, and they are, and they don't know where it's going, etc. It's so important to create a growth or separate. A lot of bank accounts, you'll have a checking and a savings, and usually your paycheck goes into your checking. Set up where the day after you get paid, however much your monthly savings goal is, gets automatically pulled out and put into that savings account. As I said, we want to automate savings. We want to treat savings as an expense. That's a great first step to take. Even if it's $50 a paycheck that you're saving, that you know is being taken out of, it's all habitual. And then from there, the last point I don't like to harp on because it's easier said than done to reduce expenses. One thing that I will challenge all of you to do that I've seen naturally reduce expenses is go through your monthly cash flow. I probably sound like a broken record if you've been on a couple of these, but nonetheless, if you go through your monthly cash flow, you see what your income is, what you're spending money on. I can't tell you how many times it's led to naturally, not just expenses being cut, but people being more aware of what they're spending their money on. So again, I'm not a preacher of to achieve your financial goals, you need to limit your expenses and save more. Yeah, that sounds great. I think let's just take inventory. If you don't have numerical answers to the questions I'm asking to you today on how much are you saving per month, how much of your salary are you saving per month, and percentage wise, what is your income now projected out to 65 to know what income you need in retirement? These are questions that I'd start be putting numbers to so you can start on your way of financial wellness. Now, a lot of times people will look at, well, why invest or why save and all these things. And I think it's really important to understand the why. We're all busy people. It's 12 something on a Tuesday, and I'm sure we have meetings and things and clients waiting for us to answer. Why are we listening today? Why would I maybe change my behavior based off of what I'm listening to right now? This really drives home the point of how any type of interest on your savings is powerful. So here we're assuming we make a $10,000 investment initially, and then over 48 years it grows 5% annually. So each year we're earning 5% on that amount. So you'll see the blue line is that. The second one is we're assuming $125 is saved each month and then 5% compounded annually as well. So it's a little less money. Over 30 years, how it grows is the bottom line. You'll see here what's important is this blue line. We basically did an initial, call it, investment and just let it grow throughout time. So we only put $10,000 of our own money, let's call it, into this quote unquote account, and it grew, it grew, it grew, and we're at this point. This bottom one is we started later in life. So we started at 40. So we're 18 years later. We started putting in 125 a month, and we invested almost four times as much at the age of 40 as we did when we were 22. And we're still at a better point when we initially invested at 22 than when we started at 40. This is a lot of numbers, and you're probably like, Tina, what are you saying? It shows the impact of starting to save or invest early on. That you could, if you look here, invested more than four times as less, and you're still at the same point down in life. We call it 48 years, or at the age of we have 65 here. So nonetheless, or sorry, at 70 here. But nonetheless, what I want to get at is it just shows over time how when you give money a chance to grow, how impactful it is. So this isn't necessarily a tactic of if you didn't start at 22, you shouldn't start. If you didn't start at 40, you shouldn't start. We Luckily, life expectancy is going up, and a lot of us have a lot of time to go no matter what age we are. It's just showing the impact of if I start at an earlier age, how much my money can grow. Even if look at these differences in how much money I put in of my own, I'd still be at the amount, just giving myself an extra 10, 20 years of saving and investing. Nonetheless, this is just driving home the earlier you start, the better, without being overly simple. So another question or concern I get with savings is if I have debt, which could be credit card debt, student loans, really anything, but I want to start saving, where do I start? And there's no, I'd say, silver bullet to it, but nonetheless, I always tell people what's growing faster. So typically, if you have credit card debt and it's growing at 25, 27% interest, or you compare it to like a gross savings account, which a lot of people say high yield savings, it grows at around 3 to 4% right now. Your credit card debt is going to outgrow your savings. Therefore, and again, I have to look at every situation to give actual advice. It might make sense to pay off the credit card debt and not save right now. Wait until you pay off the debt and then start savings. What I'm getting at there is it doesn't matter what debt or savings vehicle I'm talking about, look at the interest tied to it. Whatever has the highest interest, that's where you want to start. More than not, I see credit card debt as being something people usually have to throw all their savings or effort at to clear, and then they can start looking to saving toward goals. With other ones like student debt, or you'll see mortgages, which I'm not saying mortgage will keep from savings because it's an asset that's building value. But those have less interest rates typically in which your liabilities are growing. So it makes sense to maybe pay some of those off, but save, etc. Nonetheless, when you're looking at between savings and debt, it's always what is growing faster to figure out the balance. So investing, again, it's a topic that creates a lot of curiosity. It creates a lot of stress, for lack of better terms. And we want to create the right mindset around if this is something you want to start doing, how should we think about it? First, we want to know why we're investing. I'll tell you a quick story about someone I'm working with right now. They're in their 30s. They bought a house. They're starting to, have a family, and they were thinking about investing when we first met. Now, a lot of times, it's not whether you meet with a professional or not. Some people think, like, I might want to start investing, but they don't put much thought in why they're doing it. And a lot of times, the why is to outpace inflation or to grow their money over time. And some people, when we have volatility like we're seeing this year where the markets are down, forget that over time part. If we know that we're investing to see a return over X amount of years, we need to know that that money is earmarked to sit in that quote unquote investment account for X amount of years. That if the market goes down today, we're not just pulling money out of it to do so, because maybe we have a savings account where we'll use that money while we're letting the investments rebound and grow. All I'm getting at is investing is not I want to do that or I do, or I want to do that or I don't. It's why do you want to do it? That's really important because that'll start helping you balance out how much you put into these vehicles, etc. Two, risk tolerance. I talk about this a lot. We all fall differently when it comes to how much risk we want to take on, how much volatility. You have to think about that and think about how much do you personally feel like you can take on. One, two, based off of your financial situation and age, how much can you take on strategically from that standpoint? For example, if you're a year out of retirement, you might not want all your money in volatile vehicles because if the market goes down and now you're in retirement, you're forced to pull money out of that account. Whereas if you're in your mid 20s and you know you're not going to be using the money you're investing for, call it 10, 20, 30 years, you might be able to be a little more aggressive knowing you have time before you need to access that money. All I'm getting at here is risk tolerance depends one on your personality and two on your situation. It's important to think about that before you start. Three, this is really important, being realistic with your expectations. People see averages of, call it the S&P 500 historically has yielded around 10 to 11%. People will see that, and then if you compared it to this year where we're down over 6%, say this doesn't line up. And I'm not saying that this market this year doesn't need there might not be need changes in your investments because of it, but nonetheless what I'm getting at is your expectations based off of averages. You need to know that there's volatility within those. You need to know that these are usually longer term plays, that you're not looking to put money in today and make money tomorrow. Why you're doing it will all depend on your individual situations, but nonetheless, set your expectations now, why you're trying to do it, what your risk tolerance looks like, what return you would be happy with, so you can invest according to that. And lastly, as I said, long-term game, financial planning. That's why we want the earlier we start, the easier it is, and the less we have to pay attention to short-term volatility when we're playing the long game. So nonetheless, again, we're not trading professionals or whatever it may be on the screen where we're trying to time the market. Long term will increase your chances of success. Obviously, nothing is guaranteed when it comes to investing, but I do think it's important to think about your time horizon and know you're looking for X amount of return over X years, not that you're hoping for it to all work out tomorrow. So I touched on this in the last slide, but things to think about when you're looking at risk tolerance. One, age is a big one because age usually means or gives you an idea of the timeline from when you're investing now to when I'll need to pull out money. For example, for me, I am 26 years old. A lot of what I'm investing outside of, I purchased a home, but at that time that milestone is over. But if I was still looking to do so, yes, maybe I'd be a little more conservative with those funds, but nonetheless, I have close to 40 years till retirement. Therefore, I'm not looking to be too conservative in the short term because I have so much time to retirement. On the flip side, I plan for my mother, let's say, who is 62 and about to retire. We need to make sure that we're considering short-term volatility, or AKA maybe being more conservative when it comes to risk tolerance, because she is going to need that money sooner that she's saving and investing. She's retiring within the year. These situations change person to person. Nonetheless, what I'm getting at is age can determine how conservative or risky you are when it comes to investing. Two, a big one, knowledge of investing. We're all not professionals in things, so it's important to know what vehicles are we comfortable with? What vehicles do we know about? Which ones do we feel comfortable to start putting our money into? Be realistic with what you know about investing to be able to act on that. And if you don't, again, I'm not biased to myself. Find someone that you trust that does this for a living that can explain to you different vehicles and options so you can become comfortable. It's like finding a teacher or finding a tutor just in the financial world. Three, risk capital. What this means is, say you have an emergency fund. Therefore, if your tire pops, you don't have to sell out of investments, so you can invest accordingly with that money. What this means is having funds or buckets of money that maybe aren't tied to the market, like your savings account or different vehicles that will grow less, call it, but are less volatile, that you have your expenses and day to day covered. So you have that risk capital that will protect you against the volatility or risk that we take on when we're investing. So we're able to invest with the rest. Long story short, it's just important to have different buckets of money. You don't want to put all your eggs in one basket, no matter what you're doing, when it comes to balancing saving and investing. Lastly, there could be two of us, same age, same income, same situation, and we personally could be different when it comes to being risky or conservative. Make sure to factor that in. Think about who you are as an individual, which way you usually lean. If you maybe drive under the speed limit or you're at the speed limit usually. That's a joke I always make of where do we fall on the conservative scale? It's important to think about. And a lot of words on the screen, a lot of information. How I explain this is you'll see this is a risk tolerance that we typically go through. So what I just talked about are what are some things that we would consider when we think about where do we fall when we do a risk tolerance. This is the quote unquote risk tolerance. It's not the end all be all. There's different versions of it. But what it will show is if you're more aggressive an investor, this blue equities is just stock like vehicles. You will be invested in more of those compared to cash equivalents or just like savings or money markets and bonds or fixed income. So what this means is the more aggressive I am, the more I am invested in more volatile but higher potential vehicles, and the less aggressive I get or more conservative, you'll see this blue section decrease because I want my funds or my money, my investment funds in things that are more conservative. So stocks are the more volatile vehicles, so we invest in less in them as we get more conservative. Opposite for fixed income vehicles. You might ask, what is fixed income? These are vehicles. High yield saving isn't necessarily one, but it's a good idea where you leave your money in there and you're paid a certain amount of interest per month or per year. However, given that interest is guaranteed, you'll see it's usually less than what some equity vehicles will yield on an average basis. So you'll experience more volatile or volatility in these equity like vehicles, but you have the potential based off of statistics to receive more growth per se. Whereas fixed income, the green bonds, high yield saving, etc., the growth that you will probably receive is a lot less than the equity vehicles. However, it's a lot less volatile. So you'll see early career, again, timeline. Think like in your 20s, 30s, you have more time to retirement. So you don't need the funds that you're investing or all of them right now. So you might be invested a little more aggressively the younger you are. And then typically, as we get closer to retirement, we're working towards that conservative side of things, where we're in less volatile vehicles, knowing we're gonna need to use this money at some point. When we retire, income shuts off. If our all our savings is tied to vehicles that are volatile, we're not going to be able to spend as much, or we might deplete our savings in a quicker manner. So it's important to know, yes, time has a big factor to this, but nonetheless, this is how we might start to break up our savings and investing depending on where we fall on the scale. And if you have any questions on where you may fall, I'm happy to walk through this with you. I know it's a little convoluted of a process, but nonetheless, it's important to go through. So why do we save and why do we invest? My manager made this joke. I can't take credit for it. Why do we sacrifice right now? Why do we not just spend all of our income? It's because we all have to retire. We all have these obligations at some point. So we're sacrificing the pleasure of now for the pleasure of later. What do we need to think about when we're thinking about retiring? Um, it's not that you have to have a hard and fast answer to these questions. It's just that we meet a lot of people that don't put any thought to them. So it's something to ponder on. Like, just think about generally, where do you think you'll land? Where do you think you'll live? How do you think you'll spend your time? For me, it might change, but at this age, I'm thinking I'll just be golfing and then hanging out with whoever's around me. And that sounds funny, but nonetheless, you can start to tie expenses to that. So think about, what will your time look like? Will you continue to call it work at span, or maybe there's part-time options to be involved in different resource groups where you're doing some of that, but you're enjoying the leisure of retirement. I'm just throwing out examples, but it's important to think about how you're going to spend your time so you know, one, will any income be disposable to me? Two, what expenses may I have? Lastly, this is one that I'd say we can't really think about in totality, but more so thinking about when are you going to retire and what that'll look like. Life expectancy is around like the mid 80s in the Northeast at a certain income level. So, a lot of us are located in this area. The time that we're going to be in retirement just continues to increase. So I always say, like, it can't hurt to shoot for 30 years, whatever it may be, and be more conservative on how long you're going to have to generate this income. Nonetheless, I think these two questions are great points to think about after this, to start thinking about what retirement will look like. Again, I'm 26. My retirement might look different than what I'm talking about and thinking, but I need to start putting some form of number to it so I have a goal I'm working towards. That goal can change and move, but I'm not working towards anything if I don't have a set target. Now, this is the part where I find a lot of people don't think about because it's not spoken about often. People think about saving for retirement. They don't think about the income they need to generate. If you save, call $1 million into some account by the time you retire, that's great. What are you going to do with it? A lot of people forget about the second part of retirement is that we're distributing our savings and investments to ourselves so that we don't need to make income anymore. There's some other sources which we'll see. Social Security is a big topic, but one that, yes, it does provide some monthly income when you're retired. But statistically, and especially in the Northeast, it's not going to come close to what you need on a monthly basis. But it's important to account for how much you might have in retirement because that adjusts how much you need to prepare for your own to supplement that income. Pensions are one that are becoming more outdated. You'll see some government workers still have them. If they do, they're a lot less than they used to be, or you have to work longer for them. But again, what will my pension look like? And then what might I need on top of that to retire? Outside of this, there's some other vehicles that will kind of contribute to our retirement income. Those can look like personal savings, retirement accounts, annuities. There's a bunch of other sources of vehicles where you put your own money into it, and this is now generating income for yourself. Yes, you're putting money into Social Security and pensions, but that's a set amount. Once you turn it on, you're paid out X amount per month. But again, it is usually, I'd say a lot of times, especially in this area, not nearly enough to retire. So it's important to start to think about where am I going to get the rest of the money? People think about saving to this amount of money, but they don't think about how much income will it generate. So when we look at retirement income, we have a four box strategy, which I strongly suggest this is recorded, look back and read through this again of how do I want to break up the income that I'll need in retirement. So in terms of income sources, there's ones that are shut on and we know they're happening forever, and there's some that will fluctuate in retirement. Things like Social Security, pensions, income annuities. These are things that whether the government or yourself you shut them on and you're paid X amount forever. So we say they're predictable. We put them on, we know how much we're getting, and we get it monthly. So we know it's predictable income. The second category is income from things like stocks, bonds, our savings. This is less predictable as we're figuring out how much income we're generating from this. If we have $1 million all invested in, call it stocks, and the market's going up and down, we don't know how much income or how much amount of money we can pull out per year from that. So it's important to note that income from assets, you want to categorize that in a second bucket. So this is on and forever, and no matter what's going on in the world, I know how much I'm getting paid from them. This will fluctuate depending on what's happening in the world. Now we want to tie these different categories to these types of expenses. So hear me out on this one. Necessary expenses, things we need, housing, food, healthcare. These are things we need. Therefore, we want the types of income sources that are covering them to be predictable. Because if we need these things, we want to make sure whatever income's covering these, it's set in stone. We're going to have income coming in every month and it's going to cover these expenses. So I'll never have to worry about, no matter what's going on, what's going to pay for my housing, food, etc. So yes, there's different types of instruments that can create this, but the whole idea is for our necessities in life, we want to know they're covered. Therefore, we want to pull from predictable income to cover them. Now, second, this might be where my golfing habit, or call it addiction, falls. where it's discretionary expenses, non essential costs that will be in retirement, a vacation somewhere. As I said, golf, maybe a second car, or whatever it may be. Things that you don't need, but that you would like in retirement. Now, this is stuff, okay, if we have a bad year, we could go without things we don't need. Therefore, we look to cover these expenses with maybe income that we're generating for ourselves and assets because, worst case scenario, the markets aren't doing great and I can't pull money out of my own savings investings. I can go without some of this stuff. Now, again, not a hard and fast answer. It's just important for you all to know when you think about retirement, there's two different categories of income and there's two different categories of expenses in retirement. We want to make sure the needs are covered with what we know is coming in. The discretionary, or what we call fun stuff, is stuff that we want and we want to plan for, but it's not, call it top priority. Things that we're seeing now, we saw like income and generating it. What are we having quote unquote issues with, or what are we seeing in retirement that's preventing people from in the last slide you saw of succeeding with that framework? We're living longer. That's great. Science is advancing, medicine is advancing, therefore life expectancy is going up. However, people are having to create their own income for longer, which is a risk. Two, inflation. Stuff is becoming more expensive. That goes back to my point that if I make $100,000 now and I'm 50, in 15 years, I'm going to need more income to generate that same $100,000 lifestyle. Inflation is creating retirement to be more expensive, so we need to account for that. Three, rate of withdrawal. This is a unique term. All you need to think is this is the amount of money I pull from my savings or investments per month or year to pay for whatever expenses. So it's how much money can I pull out of my savings and investments without running out of money based off of the market volatility. Some people say 3 to 4% is what we can pull out. So if I have $1 million saved, without any advanced strategies or anything, if I'm just going by statistics, I should be able to pull out 3 to 4% per year and not run out of money. That's based off of the Monte Carlo simulation. I'm not guaranteeing that. That's just one of the rate of withdrawal theories that a lot of people have heard out there. Four, this goes back to risk tolerance, asset allocation. If I'm in retirement, maybe as you saw on the other side, I don't want to be as risky because I need this money now. If the market goes down, it's going to impact me more if I'm selling out and pulling funds out of that account. So how do I want to, structure my savings and investings to be maybe more conservative given I'm in retirement? And time again, the last one that is so hard to think about that I think people really only think about it if they've had an experience with their own family member, healthcare. Can't tell you, more and more people are living on, call it medical supports such as full-time aides or nursing homes, etc. This is not just happening more often because we're living longer, but we're using the resources for a longer amount of time. So because medicine's increasing, maybe a sickness or injury that maybe someone would possibly be in a nursing home for a year for is now able to live 3, 5 years. So we need to be able to pay for that medical expense for longer. So it's just important when we're thinking about retirement, why are we planning for it early? Why do we suggest having a plan and putting a lot of thought into it? Yes, it's becoming harder, but with the plan, you can tackle a lot of these risks I just went through. So, how can you take control? Because a lot of times when I go through these workshops, everyone's like, whoa, Tina, you went through a lot of stuff I need to do. I don't know where to start, and I don't know how to change my actions today to be better off for tomorrow. These are things that you can start learning about. One, investment concepts. I'm not saying you need to be a professional, but start to go back into the investing stuff when you saw stocks, bonds, etc. Start to learn about them. There's so many resources out there. If you don't know where to start, feel free to reach out. I can send you some resources to read on your own about different vehicles. Start to learn about them. If it's a odd concept and one that creates some overwhelming feelings when I'm talking about them, start to learn about them and it'll become more common. Two, risks. What I would just went through in the last slide. Start to learn about what risks we're seeing pop up currently in society. How retirement's becoming longer. How retirement is maybe getting more expensive with medical expenses. what life expectancy is looking like, etc. Start to educate yourself on what some risks people are running into now so you can prevent it for yourself. Three, protection options. There's so many things that fall into this category. It could be protecting yourself, it could be protecting your investments, protecting yourself against medical occurrences, all these different things. Look into different protection options for yourself now and in retirement. Again, if you're like, okay, Tina, you're telling me to learn, but I don't know what to learn, reach out to me. I have some resources in a folder that they'll mention at the end of this, or I have additional ones depending on where you're at in life and what you want to learn about that I can send you that you can read on your own and start to learn. Again, baby steps, but baby steps make a lot more progress than you think. Another thing is people don't necessarily take the time to think about like why it is that you're listening in this workshop. Why is it that this might be causing some curiosity or causing some concern? What do you have going on in your own landscape? Recognize what it is that you need to take action on and why you might want to do so and start to think about what is most valuable to you. Someone on this workshop might want a beach house and that is the number one priority. Some person on this workshop might just be concerned about what inheritance they leave for their children. Some on this workshop might not want to leave any inheritance. I could go on and on. Nonetheless, all this planning ties back to what you want. So if you don't know what it is you want and what goals you have, you really can't get started with any of this planning I just discussed. Lastly, I think it's important when we're thinking about financial planning, it's usually we're not just doing it for ourselves. Um, One, a lot of us have children. How do they factor into this? A lot of us have parents. How do we ensure that they're taken care of? Or are we doing a quote unquote audit or checking in on their finances to make sure they're covered? So down the line, I'm not funding their retirement or whatever it may be. How does this impact my spouse or partner? Or how do their efforts complement mine? It's important. Finance is such a overwhelming topic, but it becomes a lot less scary when you start to talk about it with your loved ones and those that are involved in your plan. So start to think about who's involved in this and who do I need to check in on and who do I need to start having these conversations with. The more people you spread the word to, the less you have to worry about. I'm a big believer in that. That's why we do these workshops. Lastly, I am not the financial professional that's going to tell you that you have to meet with one to start taking action. There's so many other things you can do that I'm not even like these 2 points I'll touch on, but others. I just gave you a lot of different starting points that you can take on your own. So many small things that yes, you might not watch, one of the TV shows you have on deck for tonight or whatever it may be. I understand we all live chaotic and busy lives. It's not just TV, it's taking care of family members, etc. But a lot of the action items, if you go back and watch this that I mentioned that you could start with, maybe take 5 or 10 minutes. Projecting out your income to 65, there's a calculator that you can do that on online. So I just really push baby steps, start to encourage you to take bigger ones. The more you start to take action, like with anything, the easier it is to keep going. When it says build support group, I don't mean this in like a formal standpoint. How about if you see a peer or a friend that's on this call and you could start talking to them about different terms and what they learn, checking in every week, seeing what goals do you have? What are some things that you save in? What are some things that you invest in? Make the conversation more fluid and do it with people you're comfortable with. Nonetheless, I always say, and I was just talking to Kim and some of the leadership about this earlier ahead of this workshop. Worst case, you meet with a financial professional, and again, it doesn't have to be myself. I'm just here as a resource, and they tell you all is good. I can't tell you how many times I sit down with people who think they have all the pieces and there was something they didn't think about or maybe something they're not doing. And it's not that education standpoint, it's usually more ignorance. I sit in this, or financial professionals sit in this space every day. We're meeting with people like you every day. We know how to take inventory. We know what people should like how they should balance different goals at different stages of lives. These are conversations I'm having every day, just like all of you in your different roles specialize in what you do. It really can't hurt to sit down with someone and at least have them look at what you have going on to give insight. And worst case, you leave there with clarity someone that specializes in this space looked through everything I do and they checked off on it and said, keep on going. A lot of times, what I want to touch on too is when people have debt or they don't have X amount saved, they think I can't meet with the financial professional. And I kind of want to like blow that narrative out of the water. Again, it doesn't have to be me. The people that benefit the most with meeting with a professional are typically the ones that have some form of debt or are starting to save, because if you can lay the foundation early, the impact down the line is humongous. So I strongly suggest take the small actions I said yourself, take any action. But today, and why we did this workshop, is to give you someone, a resource like myself, or I can always direct you to whoever it may be that fits your situation better. Meet with someone that talks this day in and day out to just give you even suggestions, even if you don't work with them, on where to start. It gives a lot of mental clarity, and hopefully will get some of you who haven't taken action be able to be confident and comfortable to do so. So again, what did we talk about today? And really, like, what are some of the overall themes of this series? Be proactive about your savings. The first step, create a savings goal and have it done automatically the day that you get paid or the day after. Should not be an afterthought. Biggest mistake I see meeting with people. Two, for lack of you know, I say get comfortable with investing. It's not that all of you need to do a certain form of investing, but nonetheless, statistically, it's very difficult to go throughout life without utilizing financial vehicles that help you keep up or outpace inflation. So if we're just relying on savings, down the line, we're going to start feeling that hurt more and more. So I strongly suggest get comfortable with some of those steps I talked about. Again, we're here to help if you need it, but it's definitely something based off of data and stats that's worth at least looking into. I did not put the golf icon in here, so I can't take credit for that. But think about retirement, what that looks like. It could be that you're still working, that you have a passion project, that you stop working completely, but you just want to live at home, go on a walk, and maybe grab lunch at a diner. Doesn't need to be extravagant to start to think about. But if, again, back to my goal presentation, if we don't have numbers and timelines tied to what retirement's going to look like, how do we know we're making progress to it? It's time and time again. I meet with people in their 50s or 60s that haven't done this. And I don't want to say it's too late, but there's only so much that can be done when you push off that goal or thought. So it's a great, and it could be a fun exercise. Do it with your friends. A lot of you have the same ideas or goals. Make it something that's casual that you can then put some really basic numbers behind. You'll see how much clarity it brings you just from a couple minutes of thought. Lastly, it's easier said than done, but I think I gave a lot of great action items on how to take control of your finances. Just figure out what's happening now without you doing anything. How much are you saving naturally? How much are you spending naturally? What is your income at and what percentage of are you saving? Inventory is number one. What liabilities do you have? Do you have credit card debt? Do you have student loans? What interest rate is that growing at? Figure out what's going on, and then you can kind of make progress from there. Again, I mentioned that seeking out professional help is always a great option, but I always want you to leave these workshops having action items that you could take yourself. Those are great ones to start with that can kind of give you an idea of where to start taking action on. And last but not least, again, we with all the workshops I do, whether it's with NJFE, employers, etc., this is my offer to you of what I mentioned. Worst case, we do an audit on your financial background and we say all is well. This is kind of time that I give all of you if you have personal questions that you want to go through that you're not necessarily comfortable asking here, or you want to dive a little bit into what you have going on personally and where you should start. Feel free to scan the QR code, or you can reach out to me directly and we can set up some time. There's no strings attached, no cost to it, just time for you to sit down if you don't know where to start, because the whole point of this series is to get as many people started as possible on their financial planning journey. So I will give it back to Kim here. Thank you everyone for having me, and I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much, Christina. This was wonderful. Yes, definitely. I think a lot of us come with curiosity, bridge to concern, avoid the chaos, and then you help us get comfortable with this. So we thank you. We thank you. We thank you. And this concludes the last of the series presented by Mass Mutual and Christina. So certainly, we really hope that everyone who has attended or seen all of these series are getting as much as we have gotten from them. And of course, we have other offerings coming up. So tomorrow we are going to be having Tuesday, April 1st, the last of the NAFSKI Math of Food series. This one is going to focus part three on supermarket math, budgeting, and smart choices. So certainly please register for this. This is an amazing series all about how we are using food and math together in our lives. So, and that's with our partner, NASCI. And then, of course, our next webinar that's coming up in April, on Tuesday, April 14th at 11 a.m. That one is going to be titled Problem Solvers Wanted: How to Grow Critical Thinkers at Home. So please join us for that one. Our monthly webinars, we provide tons of information on a lot of really great and pertinent issues for families, educators, community organizations, and of course our students, who are the reason that we do all of this work. So thank you so much for joining us. Please, before you leave, it is very important for us that you do our survey. So the survey link will be in the chat, or you can use your phone and do the evaluation using the QR code. And of course, we will see you next time at another one of our wonderful offerings, whether it is virtual or in person. We thank you for joining us. Go on to our Eventbrite and you can see what else is in store. Have a wonderful day, everyone, and thank you very much. And again, thank you, Christina.